anyway, my name is Jim Hicks. Unfortunately, I'm the only member of my team remaining. The last person that was so involved, unfortunately, had a really bad loss in his family. Couldn't do it with his State Department. So please remember him in your thoughts, because he went through a really bad experience in the family loss. Anyway, what I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight was memory refinery. And Chris, for your benefit, what it is, it's really simply is a way for a person to go onto a website or via a recorded mechanism and reminisce about something in the past that's important to them. And I know there's a number of modernized competitors to that, but they're really all sort of working in their own medium. I guess it's sort of how they see the world. So anyway, this is an attempt for us to, as it says, capture, curate, and share our global culture. And because really, I mean, I think everything that we do is sort of story-driven, whether you're selling something or whatever. So that's what this is about. So the first thing that you had asked us to do in our assignment was to do a story outline. Right, so what we tried to do, my daughter actually was working with me on this as well, so I give her some kudos too. But what I tried to do was go through, and Chris, I did start ahead of the programming with some of the planning and design stuff, just kind of get my mind around like what we're going to have to do. And then we went into, so phase one, just to give everybody a benefit of an overview. So phase one was planning and design, really, because I think a penny in planning is worth $5 on the showroom floor. So the more you plan, the better off you are when you actually come to bringing anything to market. Phase two is really about the programming itself, and that's probably the essence of what we were doing today. So the story capture, in my case, the story capture and then the sharing of those stories. Phase three is about expanding that capability. So something that we call timeline that we would be developing that allows you to go out and integrate with other people's stories and their timelines, share things and collaborate on your stories, comment back on other people's stories and things like that. So the first phase in our business plan is really about capturing the information and creating a body of knowledge that would be useful to someone and valuable. And then on the other side of that is really about sharing that and leveraging the power of networking to really extend it. And then phase four obviously would just be continuing to build that out. Based on the model that we were given, the planning was around $40,000 as a guesstimate. Phase two, that's really the building of what would go to market first, I guess we call the MVP, would be about $49,500. Phase three and phase four are really very low because I didn't put a great deal of effort into those at this point because we're just trying to get it to market, right? So the total was a little over $100,000. Again, when you're doing some of the planning and some of the bottle washing and everything else, that number's going to go down on the front side. But in terms of programming, I definitely would need some help. So I think that number's probably going to be a little low too, since I've got to go get someone to help.
Can I ask some questions?
As many as you like. Sure.
So your MVP kind of would almost end at phase two to some extent. So it looks like you went even further for the assignment, which is great. But I would say like your first version out the door after the planning really is the MVP. So you couldn't stop there, at least for the purposes of this assignment. Generally speaking, planning and design, I definitely see be almost a 50-50 split. So that could be accurate. My sense is you probably would spend, maybe even a little bit less on planning and design with like sort of more of a senior team, but that looks about right. Like from a ratio perspective, there's nothing there that I see that's like a problem. The stories themselves, so some things like design, it's hard to just have a story. So I actually think what you did there is right. You kind of broke down into different phases and then like rolled them all up. Some of the more specific ones I would have broke down further. And the one way that I would have focused on was who the role is of the user story. So callback, details, inclusion. It would almost be like assign a role to that end user and then start with that end user. So I would add the role assignments to the user stories. I actually like the breakdowns, the 1 to 4. Like I feel like your distribution of them, kind of makes sense. Have you done this type of? Have you done technical project management before?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of shows, So I definitely can see some of that.
The thing that was also interesting before I put this planning portion in, this number was just below 4, which made it look like 3 point something, I believe. And it just sort of intuitively made sense to me because I figured there was some sort of heavy lifting. I'm sorry, it was just about 3. That's what it was. So that sort of made sense to me.
I think in general, we're using a blended rate of $125 an hour, which is a good blended rate to use for the industry. If you had really specialized people, I mean, some people would make $200 an hour depending upon the specialization, and even upwards of $250 in some cases.
I can show you there's a couple of slides I'll put in here just for
the number of the MVP basically is 90K, which I think is actually a good number. I would just try to keep, generally speaking, I try to keep an MVP under 125K. That's what I tell all my customers is just see what you can sort of model at that level, and if your MVP is $250,000, $300,000, then you're probably doing too much, or we should figure out a way that we can break it up into smaller phases and test the individual ones. So anyway, I mean, this looks. I don't know what all the others look like, but I think overall, it looks good. So
okay, thank you.
Jim, can I interrupt for 1 second? I forgot to mention we're going to do 5 minutes for presentation, 5 for questions. So total 10, however we slice it.
Okay.
So your first 5 are up, Chris. Just set you up for another 5.
Okay. Thanks.
Should I wait then?
No, whatever you want to do. Like however.
Just
10 minutes. If you feel like it's better for you to interrupt then.
I'll wait then in the future. But thanks.
I'll let you know when you're 5 minutes through, just so you have a.
Okay, great, no problem. Anyway, and just for everybody's benefit, what I did to get some of that in my head about how much time it would take is I just went through and did some kind of almost like process engineer maps of like each of the user tasks, each thing the user would be doing. So there's a couple of these in here just in case anybody want to look at it. It helps you get your head around it, right? And then I just tried to make a sort of a Gantt chart to give myself a view on like how this would work out. And like you say, really it stopped for the MVP, it stops here. So that's all I wanted to do there. And that helped me to get a sense of actually when the calendar date would be the 6th of April. So that makes sense to me too, because this way you can take into the weekends, holidays, all this kind of stuff, and you can kind of burn it out that way.
Did you do that in Microsoft Project?
No, actually I did that in a free add-on on Google Docs on the Excel, the spreadsheet, the Google spreadsheet.
What's the add-on called?
I forget. I'll show it with you in just a minute. I mean, look, I knew nothing about Google Docs and stuff before we started this, so I was amazed it was there. I was like, oh, this is great. The only thing, and it also had features in it that allow you to do resourcing and to assign costs to the resource, which is pretty cool. But for some reason, I couldn't get it to automatically calculate those things. But it was there. I'm sure it works. I just didn't have the time to mess with it.
This is a personal preference, but I don't usually go that far with a lot of things. But and usually if I'm trying to come up with dates, I more approximate, and I'll come up with a calendar date separate from the tool. But it's good.
Well, it just kind of helps me keep my head around it, and it also helps when I'm sharing it with other people, because I find that sometimes if you keep it to yourself long enough, it gets extremely difficult to then quickly share it. But that's just from experience. And I just wanted to show everyone a few shots of it. By the way, thank you so much for the Ketotopia recommendation. What an amazing tool, guys. If you didn't try it, it is so worth the $97. It is so worth it. It is incredibly powerful. And you can embed it in PDF to be clicked through as well, which is fantastic. It's really slick. So anyway, this was just we did it for iPad. We thought that would be a great medium, because what we're sort of struggling with now is that, we're talking about rolling this out initially, say, to like World War II vets, right? To capture their stories because they're dying off now like at an alarming rate, right? So anyway, I don't want to steal all the time on the camera, but the net of it is we're thinking about building sort of a hardened iPad app where you literally send the iPad, the person gets done with their father or their uncle, whatever, and then they just pay it forward, they just send it forward to the next person on the list, and it kind of rotates around. We thought about building like, maybe 20 of these and get them moving, to get some mass around it. and also give people the ability to come in over the internet. But that's sort of the goal here. Anyway, just a few screenshots from it. It's a great tool. What a nice tool. And I thought this was a great quote, sort of talking about stories. So, anyway.
How much time do we have?
You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
1 minute. Do you mind just going back a little
No,
bit
I'll be happy to.
on the user interface part?
Yeah, sure.
Which workflow did you try to pick? How would you describe the workflow?
Well, what I did was I picked out each of the button actions, right? So what I did was I would take sign in, and then I would trace it to end, and then I would come back and take sign up, trace it to end, and I tried to create sort of like modular blocks so that you could logically reuse them, right? And I thought that sometimes when you map things that way, then it'll allow someone else that has to do the work to say, oh, I understand how this all ties together. That's what those flows were about, really. And then you could have different people build different parts of it, and maybe keep my costs down some, and maybe let people enhance it also. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
So that's all I did in the flows were I just did flow mappings like that. That's was that not? Did you want us to do it another way?
I was just trying to focus on one workflow. We're kind of we're pretty much out of time, but I was just curious if you had when you were working through the workflow, did you figure out any shortcuts from like a user testing perspective that you could basically a hack that you could implement to reduce the scope of the product at all?
Sure. One of the things that we thought about was you could even use the telephone, right? Where you simply just set up a really simple callback app, which everybody and their brother's done now. And you get somebody, you could start out when you're recording it, just literally, all they got to do is go online, sign up, blast back the callback information, they call in, do it all. And then on the back end, after you've been curating it, you could do voice to text, maybe get some grad students that are writers to go hack it all up and then call the people back or interact with them via email.
Mechanical Turk. Yeah, it's good. Good job.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I'll be talking about CANSO. Again, I think all of you, or most of you know the idea behind it already. But again, it's the idea here is to kind of connect patients, researchers, and doctors, as well as insurance companies on the same platform, so they can connect, share, and learn from each other, so that once a patient's diagnosed, from the point of diagnosis, they can kind of track the patient and make sure they're cured by 5 to 7 years, which is not really the case at the moment. Most of them are gone all the way up to stage 4, stage 3 before the patient is actually diagnosed or even brought to help. So we're trying to share information, make sure they have all the available resources so that they can get to that point. So again, kind of what we're trying to do here is again bringing all 4, and this kind of what we're building out of the portal is kind of a sign up and a sign in page, and then an interactive info source which is going to give them information to them, a customized search. Again, bridging the gap is pretty much connecting them with each other in a forum type of setup, but also having that patient management area where insurance companies can kind of step in and kind of guide patients and doctors to wherever they need to go in terms of therapies, clinical trials, or any other setup they'd like to push forward with the patient without increasing the cost too much. So here's some of the user stories. We have I think almost 30, but again, we kind of just put them together, what they were trying to do, where they should go within the website, and we kind of separated between patient, payers, which are who are the insurance companies, and the physicians. And here are a few more, as well as the researchers. We kind of put them in the end. And users pretty much from it could be any 3. It doesn't have to be just one or the other. And finally, the visitor, again, anyone that's not, it could be a family member, it could be someone who's not just not visiting the system, but kind of just wants to check out what's going on. So our based on the estimate, we had about 142 points in the system, so estimated about 71,000. I mean, that's like the very, very, very low end. Thinking closer to 200,000 is what it's going to be eventually, but at least for a at least like I said, the MVP, that's probably what we're expecting. In terms of timeline, again, we're pretty much gone through phase one. We're into again the planning stage where kind of just building up the architecture and the database for the system, and hope to start the beta by December 1st. And then version 1 again is kind of a continuation of the beta, but hopefully a little more pronounced product. And then finishing up with the quality testing and QA. So probably by June, end of June, early July, we expect to have complete setup, MVP set on, which again, based on my experience, sounds to be about right, about 5-6 months. So let me see if this actually works. So we just put a quick mock-up on, yes,
Okay, cool.
on Envision. It wants to open up. Alright, there we go. And it's not a pixel perfect, image, but we're trying to get as close to the design as possible for the actual website. So I'm just going to kind of run through, what certain people can do. So if you're a patient, you can just start here. You can sign in, and you're going to go into your, logged in page where you can obviously go into your info source. Again, go into the forums, or you can click search. So I kind of just go through, each one quickly. If you click on the info source, what we're really trying to do here is, again, you can input your information in, type of cancer you have, race, ethnicity, age, and sex, and based on all these algorithms, we actually, are able to give you, to click data, we're able to give you the top 5 therapies for your particular cancer, right? And not only that, we're going to give you a percentage of how successful it is for a particular cancer. So here, again, you can go to surgery. That usually is the number 1 case for most. So the patient here we try to put in here is a 55-year-old myeloma patient who's stage 2B. Okay, so for them, surgeries are probably the best, and then alpha 2B is probably the next best, and then so on and so forth. We also plan to give you top 5 physicians within your area, or you can choose in the nation or the world that who treat your particular disease particularly well and have really good success. We're probably going to be using Connolly database, which is a physician ranking database around the world, and we're probably going to just bring all the information from them for the physician rankings. We also give you the top 5 clinical trials that are currently going on. Again, this is going to be coming in from clinicaltrials.gov. We're going to be using their API, kind of bringing in any new trials that are coming up for a particular drug or disease, and we're going to try and match it to how best it works for you. So that's one thing you can do as a researcher or as a patient. The other thing, again, you can also search, different information based on, literature compounds. I mean, most patients don't really use most of this, but I feel like they would like to know a lot about this, so we do want to provide that for them. And you can also, if we can go back, join the community. Is that time? All right, I'm almost done. You can also join a community, go into forums, and kind of put in any information you want, and doctors or researchers can come and interact with you in any way you want. So either you can put your information up there. So we actually create a profile. So you can put your profile up there to patients or physicians and researchers to see which clinical trials or which therapy or which physician you should go to watch or go see. So for second opinions as well as from doctors as well as researchers, to see what you're doing is correct and it's probably best for you. So again, we're not really trying to replace the doctor, but we're trying to give as much tools as possible to the patient so that they have as much information as they can for their particular disease after they're diagnosed. Doesn't really matter what stage they are, but trying to get the best tools for them. All right. So, any questions?
Can you just go back to the presentation where you had the plan? And it looks like in Envision you did. Looks like you built out one more back. Yeah, right. That one. Yeah, actually the previous one. Yeah, right there. In the mock-ups that you did, it looked like you did actually a lot more than like just one workflow. It looks like you started to really focus on not only the whole app experience, but also even like a I wouldn't say pixel perfect, but I mean, you had a lot of the design and whatnot, a lot more fleshed out than most people would.
Right.
So were you focusing on all three workflows basically for researcher, doctor, and patient?
Yeah, patient and insurance company. I mean, I didn't really show the insurance company part, but there's also insurance company part where they can look at your dashboard and kind of interact with you in that way as well. But so here's a dashboard for insurance companies, so they can actually look at your information through them as well. But so we kind of focus on all four and had different people working on different things, so that they just focus on that particular workflow and get feedback from different people, get design some individual ideas that they think will work best with UX, UI, and kind of just focusing on all four at the same time, and then obviously making sure it interacts with each other.
Yep. So your MVP basically needs all four roles?
Yes, or expecting for all four roles to work, at least in the first version. We're actually going to add a lot more to this, but this is just like the initial version that we have right now.
Okay. 71,000, I would say, for four roles sounds pretty low. I know you mentioned something about 200,000. What was the 200,000 number? You mentioned it, but it wasn't. You kind of mentioned it in passing.
Right. So again, 71,000 was pretty much what we figured would come just to beta, and then after that we will get to the full version. Probably with additions and feedback and all that, we'll probably take another 70,000 to 80,000, and then for planning for QA, and then for finishing up the whole thing, we'll probably take another 40,000. So that's kind of where we estimated. So again, this was just pretty much what can I get by end of this year or early next year, and then kind of going from there.
Can you go back to the numbers? My sense from the user stories, they look pretty high level. So I would definitely recommend breaking it down further. It's good that you have a user role there. So you got payers, physician. It's very clear who their user role is. But I would still make it so each one of those has a verb and an object, and so that like private messaging section would get much more refined in terms of who messages whom, and sort of like what constraints might be.
Yeah, so we actually use version 1, and we actually have about 200,000 200 user stories. I just grabbed most of the high. So here are just priority high. So I just grabbed the first 30 that I thought ended high, and then started going with medium and low. So these were just all the high-level ones that I definitely wanted in version 1 of the app. But we're using version 1 right now to kind of put all the user stories together. So I don't want to bore everyone with 200 user stories. So I just put in the top 30 that I found were important.
Got it. What's the math on that? So even if you had 200 stories and they were all just 1 point, 2 points is basically $1,000. The math doesn't make sense to me there. But anyway, I'll take your word for it.
Okay, it wasn't exactly like 200.
Yeah,
it's just a lot.
But does that mean that they were all 1 point stories though?
Yeah, most of them were very low.
Got it. Okay, all right, then that does make sense. All right.
Yeah, most of them are low. Yeah.
Good job. Your number is still low on the 71, but and that's a consulting rate, right? Like if
right.
You had a technical co-founder who's coding all of this. I mean that's
that's really
you're not going to pay them $1,000 a day or whatever.
Right. So that's really the plan, is kind of just get a technical co-founder on there. I mean, I have a technical team, so most people are doing this right now, anyway. But so it's not going to be like a consulting rate, but we could plan to get someone close to it.
Separately, outside this conversation, I'm just curious, like on the sales side. So, I'm curious to talk to you about it because I have a feeling you probably don't need to launch all 4 user roles to get your first customer. So I think you can probably cut scope in that regard.
Okay.
It looks like you calculated calendar dates and all that stuff. So, it's hard to tell, like, if you did that right, you're counting holidays and all that other things that sort of come up and then the number of people that work on it. But overall, I think it looks good. There's a couple things in terms of the numbers, like, that I feel like are questionable. But overall, I feel like you did, essentially more than, sort of what's asked for you for the assignment. So, good job.
Next.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What happens if you do this follow like a suggestion about one user type?
I can't.
Could you focus on doctors and say and drive?
Well, again, the whole point is to get as many people as you can on one, within the same place. So I probably need at least 2 interactions. So I can't just do doctor themselves. but I probably need the patient, doctor, or insurance payers, providers, that kind of thing. But I need at least 2 players to go for something here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Ann, and along with Ernie, we're here to tell you about Perfecta. So what is Perfecta? Basically, it makes scheduling easier by instantly alerting your network of open work shifts. So think about it as a professional version of group texting or group messaging, plus the feature of scheduling. We focused on the RN industries in healthcare because there's a lot of pain points that we've gone through in previous classes. It's so expensive to try to get a nurse to fill an empty shift. Basically, the scheduler needs to go down a long list, make phone calls, and there's a lot of back and forth just to fill one shift. So it's a really big problem. It's systemic. You have to deal with this every day. So the 2 workflows we focused on is on the scheduler and on the staffers. So we broke down those 2 user stories. We broke down those 2 groups into user stories. And basically, just to give you a few highlights, for example, the scheduler would need to add a list of contacts from her roster. The scheduler can add a contact's first name. And so from the scheduler side, the approximate completion date was 12/26/2014, and it would take about $36,000 to create just that side of it. And for the other workflow is on the staffer side, and that would take about $20,000. So in total, it would be about $75,000 and would be completed in end of February. Personally, from a business perspective, I've not worked on a technical side before. It seemed kind of high to me, but a couple of my team members were more technical, and they said this is very reasonable, if not low. So again, this is just bare bones MVP replacing phone calls and going down that list with a workable app. This isn't even for the website.
So then some of our team got together to work with Keynotopia, and we actually created some mock-up screens based on the process of creating an alert. So from the point of view of that scheduler who needs to be able to reach out and communicate very quickly to a large staff of people, that person would need to pick the date, choose the role, set the time for the shift, include any of the other information, and then choose the recipient. So this was just a simple mock-up of that screen. Once that process was completed, they could press the send, and the idea would be that the system would send an alert to the staffers who are assigned there, and they could then either reply with an accept or a decline, and the scheduler would have a much faster answer for that problem rather than having to make so many phone calls. So we went through that process, as well as we built a separate set of screens based on what it would look like if we actually built an app rather than just relying on SMS or email for those messages. What would it look like to a staffer who might be able to see the information within an app, have buttons to accept and decline, maybe see some history about the details of what they're doing, and as far as look at the detail of the pending shifts and schedules and locations and maps and whatnot. So I think that's it. There is a demo. I don't know how much time we have. So
I think you want to click that one.
There you go.
There you
Okay.
go.
So you can't actually click on it. You have to click over here to go through the slides. I think. No.
I think you should just click on it.
Okay. So splash screen, sign in, capture the person's email, signing up. The first time you'd obviously have them set passwords, accept terms, process for how they handle forgetting shifts, taking a look at how they might look at things when they could accept shifts, see the ones that they might have not confirmed yet with the pending, the ones that are still open and could be selected, as well as some things that are still outstanding. You could have a map that's included, and you could see some messaging from within the app. But none of that's necessarily needed in order for it to be an MVP. And that's what we're really trying to take a look at when we try to figure out exactly what can you do is to deliver this in an MVP test mode. You don't necessarily have to have all those features, but that's really showing you kind of what we see as the future potential.
Good stopping point. Was what you did in Envision, did that match the plan, or was there like a little bit of misalignment or just difference?
I think different team members are trying to express where the vision is for this project. We have such a little bit of time between each assignment to be able to do things that we're all trying to pull each other in different ways and say, see what this is. So for the homework, we tried to be more scope assassins and take a look at like, these are the things that you absolutely have to have in order to make that work. And so we were trying to get to the nouns, the verbs, and the objects there, so that we could figure out our user stories and be a little more tight. The demo has a little bit more room.
Sure. I just realized that you're the first one to follow the directions to actually do two workflows on your estimates, which is good. And there's actually always a misalignment between like the functional plan in a spreadsheet versus the designs. Like there's, depending upon how someone runs that process, like how often you synchronize is key. And then there's differing opinions about which one should lead the other. Like should the functional description sort of lead the interaction design, or should the interaction design lead the functional?
Right.
And I think there's good reasons to do either one. It's a longer discussion, but I think your user stories are really good. You have basically in your category, you basically have the user role, where some people might try to condense that into just the user story format itself, but it's fine. Kind of, you basically have the exact concept there, including the assignment of who would actually do the work. There's differing opinions about what the level of effort should be specified in. I always like the Fibonacci sequence or just exponential.
Sure.
There's a theory behind that, but I think it's fine to just sort of use a linear scale too. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Actually, is that Fibonacci? It is. Nice. Yeah, good. That's another discussion, but I think your numbers make sense. For only picking two workflows, and if you were able to keep it that low as a consulting rate, that'd be awesome. It's hard to do it for mobile app because there's always two systems. Not only do you have the back end system, you have the front end system. But any modern architecture today really should be built. Even a web app should be built almost as two systems, where there's an API that's driving the experience. But I think a lot of devs will cheat and sort of just make direct database calls and whatnot. But I think overall the numbers that you have could work. It all depends. I feel like you did the assignment right. You have. How did you calculate your shipment dates?
We took the total number of the days, and we calculated that, not including weekends.
These are abbreviated user stories. There's more.
Got it. Yeah, so it would take more than that to really deliver the app. This is just literally that one screen. What does it take to deliver that screen? And there's more that you'd need in order to have the complete MVP.
There's still like a minute left. Just curious, so what were other product hacks or whatever that you did to kind of cut down scope? I'm very familiar with this problem, by the way. Not for me, but my significant other. But I know this problem very well. Okay.
It's just been a constant discussion amongst the team of what do we need to include in order to do things, and what's required there in order for it to be interesting to be sold. We actually had the opportunity to have some of our team members sit down with potential customers and go through get feedback on these screens and say, this is what they needed, and it was, certainly already delivering, something that they said that they would pay for. So that was a good feedback as well.
Did you ask how much they paid for it?
We did ask that, but the person that would be using it wasn't in the position to be buying it because it's like an RN hospital situation. So that part of the discussion is deferred to the next discussion. So.
No, it makes sense. There's usually 3 buyers in any large software sale.
Mm-hmm.
So the end user, so that's who you're talking to. Usually IT, and then the money person. So that makes sense.
Yeah, that was helpful in your discussion that you really need to at least have 2 of those 3 people in order to be able to make the sale. So remember that.
There were some features that we had originally discussed. One of our other team members who can't be here today because Mike is an RN, and she always has trouble filling the 11 p.m. shift or 6 a.m. shift every Friday. And so we're thinking, it would be so great if there was a way you can add an incentives into the app to get people to bid or something like that. But for the purposes of this exercise, we focused on, what's the bare minimum that we can create to show somebody, put it in front of them, and get them to use it. And so when our colleague went to speak with a potential customer, she got it instantly, and she saw the screen. She's like, "Oh my God, this would save me so much time."
Good job.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Deandra Wilson, and this is
Jeff.
we're half of Team Telelocal, and unfortunately, Lindsay couldn't be here today to give the presentation. But we all worked on it together, so I am not the tech person. I will do my best to answer any questions, but Jeff has to run, so we're going to breeze through this pretty quickly. So Found Local is, wait, why am I not able to? Thank you. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. So clearly I'm not a tech person. So what Found Local does is connects buyers who are looking for furniture that's well-made or vintage, and provides a curated selection of local vendors and items that are what buyers are looking for. It's a way to get people who are, would probably just go to Pottery Barn and buy some mass-produced reproduction of an item to look at, original pieces that are reclaimed or have been well-loved over the years that, could be just as easy to find if you know where to look. So we went through 2 workflows. The first one was the vendor workflow. So we are asking vendors to participate in this process and upload their inventory into the website so that people can view it. And so the vendor workflow, we want to make it as simple for them as possible because these are very busy people. They're somewhat not tech savvy for the most part, and they need something to be like basically one click to get something uploaded, take some pictures, and easily sync it with their current inventory. So we estimated that this could cost $13,500, but right now Lindsay is using WordPress and plugins. So she anticipates that it could be less expensive if we kind of DIY it that way. Thanks. The vendor user stories. This is a sample of what we have. Basically running a list of all the things that the vendor would have to do or would want to do to maintain their inventory on the site and get sales and connect with buyers. So the prototypes. Thanks.
Yep.
So I don't know if you want to talk about the prototyping process.
Okay, so basically for the vendor side of things, we have the log on, and when they go to the log on, immediately they're on the dashboard page where they can manage their inventory or add a new item. And the add a new item just basically lets them add photos, descriptions, dimensions, and the product name, and then they can categorize it. So there's vintage stuff, new century. I don't know a lot of furniture categories, but there's a lot of stuff that way. There's tags, and then pretty much when they submit it, they can add another one. So we went with a really basic, just a quick, they're in, they're out kind of workflow for them on this one.
Yeah. So for the customer side, the customer wants to browse. They want to see, a variety of items in their category. So we want to make it easy for them to, find something that they love on the site. And so basically, we want to allow them to navigate product listings as easily as possible. And again, she estimated $14,000, but again, using WordPress and plugins, we may be able to cut that somewhat. So user stories for the customer, it's pretty simple. They want to be able to search, filter, see where it's located, see details, view pictures. And so
you guys have one more minute.
Prototype for these?
So basically, the consumer will come on, search for what furniture they want to buy, and then they can filter down the results onto the search page. And then we have the product page where they can get more detailed information about it, see more images from different angles, buy it, or contact the vendor. And then on the next page, they can actually, it would be like the checkout page for them. And
is this good?
Nice. Does that view on Proto.io actually work? Is that how you did everything was done in Proto.io?
Yes. Well, yeah, I don't know, she worked on some and I worked on some, but I don't know if our interaction got pulled in.
It's not that important. Can you just go back?
Yeah. Just give me a slide number and I'll go to it.
Yeah, the project plan, please. So it's good that you did 2 workflows. I think your user stories overall are good. The way that they're written, it's probably the most detailed level, I think, of anyone I've seen so far, at least on the presentation side, which is good. The more detailed, the better. The more detailed it is, the less uncertainty there is, and that means that your numbers are more right than they otherwise would be. I agree. Comments about WordPress, WooCommerce. I'd say generally speaking, street price of any WordPress site is somewhere in around the $10,000 range. This is what we're doing. This exercise is more if you were just building a platform from scratch, kind of the mechanics and all, and how the math works. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little different in the WordPress domain. Street price is usually $10K. If you have something really more complicated, e-commerce, that will definitely bump you up. But anyway, the mechanism, this method is less, I'd say, effective on the WordPress side. I just wanted to kind of point that out. But if anything, you get a higher number with this method than you would going with someone that knows WordPress and whatnot, especially with WooCommerce and everything that you're trying to do. I like your roles, vendor and shopper. It's obviously pretty simple. And I also thought on the description of the vendor side, it seemed like you've done a little bit of work to kind of condense the number of steps to upload items, which is really important. Yeah. I think as much as you can limit the choice there and cut scope essentially for yourself, it matters, because in a lot of ways the biggest risk of this product is that no one cares. No one even goes to the site before they even get to the vendor workflow, right? So you don't want to spend a ton of time on the vendor workflow because you want to measure, is anyone even going to go to the vendor site, number one, and then actually upload furniture. So you could have the greatest workflow in the world, but if nobody gets there, it doesn't matter. So I think you're right to kind of cut it down. Can you go back to the workflow for the vendor, the visual? Got it.
That's actually one thing we considered too. From the Lindsay's talk with vendors, it's just time. So even a quick app where they can write a title, description, dimensions, and take photos, and then we pretty much create it for them on the site. is what we also considered. Like it would be like a phone gap type of app. It doesn't have to be native because like we're not using anything that's like really intensive for iOS. Just a basic post request web server to like a field thing.
Yeah. Mobile web can get a little funky. Like if you're trying to do camera integration, it's definitely not. There's a lot of issues there. It'll work in some instances, but I'd be careful there. But anyway, just that's more of a platform, sort of discussion, which is different than what this assignment is. But I usually advise people if you're going to integrate with the photo library, GPS, any sort of like core mobile functions to go native. But that's my opinion. But that doesn't mean for an MVP. I think mobile web, you want to use to your advantage, hopefully to cast a wide net and get sort of more bang for your buck in that regard. And in expense, basically user experience is less interesting. But, I didn't see dates. Did you guys calculate dates?
I think she did. There were dates. And I should have mentioned it more clearly. So January 16th and then February 8th.
And like in terms of information about the dates, she would be more suited to talk about that. Just kind of
I didn't do this for the other folks. Nice. Yeah, so February 8th is actually a Sunday, so it's one of those things where
we'll be working round the clock.
Because I've been nailed by this in project management. Like if you substitute business days for calendar days, you're dead. Anyway, but it's a fun mistake to catch. It's a fun mistake to catch. But overall, I think you followed the directions and did a good job. It was a first stab, so good job.
Thank you.
Just as a refresher, we're making Dink. Can you actually switch to the landing page? So Dink is a service for dual income, no kids couples. As these couples get older, their friends have kids, and they get marginalized in this friend group, and they still want to go out and have fun and have a nightlife. It's free, so we're making a service to connect them with other like-minded dinks and send them out for a night in town. Really want to go. So, two workflows. And the first one we did was the sign-up process. Basically, just they sign up, fill out their profile, and basically it just gets them started. So we'll just go through it. Right. So it's probably actually better if we start. Just go to the next one. Workflow. Yeah. So we just did balsamic. First screen, sign up page. Next, they fill out information for both partners, and they select a couple's photo for their profile, their joint profile. And next, they answer a few basic questions, multiple choice, just to get some back-end information started. We use that to make the matches. And after they go through a few of them, next one, their profile set up. We let them know that we're going to match them up. In the meantime, they can either answer more questions to further customize their profile, or they can just check out the profile. And these are just more of the questions. That's what it'll look like. They can either skip or submit. It's kind of similar to OkCupid. So if you go back to the spreadsheet. So the breakdown, we just broke it down into the screens. Essentially, it's kind of like the views. So we mixed it up with user stories and system stories, specifically for this workflow. So we ignored all of setting up the user system. That's a completely different effort. So user stories are mainly building the front-end web page, making sure they see all the fields and buttons that need to be seen. System stories are when the system receives a submission on the sign-up screen, it creates a new user, for example. So this particular workflow we figured was going to take about 17 and a half days based on points. One particular area that takes a lot of points is when users submit their profile image, because it requires some AJAX update on the user end, so the system has to process it and send it back to the page while they're still on it. But otherwise, we tried to break it down so that each story was kind of its own unit. And ultimately, it will cost $17,500 just directly based on points. And we use the 1, 2, 4, 8 system, and 1.4 hours. And right, so next workflow.
I will, I guess, follow Ryan's format for the second workflow. So this was you've created a profile. We have a date plan for you. So this is the screen that you would see. You would get like a push notification or like an email, or you would log in and see this. It would show you the other two couples that you're matched with, and it would tell you like what the event is, where it is, the date, and if that's all sounds good, you can click sounds great. You can't really see it on here, but there's a link really small that's like that doesn't work for me. So if you click that, then it updates the time and date suggestion. You say that sounds great. If the other couples haven't logged in, then that date would automatically be updated. If they have logged in and accepted, then there would basically be a whole nother, they would get a notification saying, how about this date? And then once you find a date that works for all three couples, this is kind of the success page. And I guess this is when you accept. So and then this is the success page. There will be an option to add it to your Google Calendar. And so all the info you need, basically.
Basically,
Let's have a minute.
Okay. The difference between this and the previous page is that if one couple figures out their date first, the other couples haven't. So the website just shows them the previous page and lets them know that they'll be notified when the other couples accept. Otherwise, if the couples have all determined the date, then it will show them that confirmed page.
And this is just the same as the last one, same process. We did kind of like the user stories and the system side stories, same point system, and this one came in at 13.5 based on 2 engineers.
And we accounted for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we did account for upcoming holidays if we were starting now. But we didn't really do like a projection. Like if we started today, like the projected completion date, we more just estimated the stories and the number of days needed. Oh, no, I guess we did. Okay. Yeah.
That's it.
So this is the mapping product and not lean startup section, but I'm just wondering, why did you start with three couples instead of 2?
Because we thought 3 would be more comfortable. If you're going with like one other couple, it's like a double date. But this is for just people who want to be friended. We thought it would be like too intimate, just 2 couples, like just one stranger.
Got it.
So.
Just curious. I'm no longer a dink. Are you guys dinks? You're too young to be dinks.
Yeah, that's what most people have told us.
All good. I thought your workflows were good. I like actually how you picked sort of like the exception in the one case. Like, it's always easy to kind of forget those, and like that usually is the type of forgetting those types of things is oftentimes what kills projects. Well, not kills them, but
You
just
mean
restricts them.
the image story, or
I can't make it.
or the
Yeah.
We talked a lot about that
Yeah.
and like how to handle it and how many chances you give people.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Your spreadsheet looks very good. I would expect it would look good from a fellow art builder like Sailor. So not surprising. I found really no issues with your spreadsheet, which is good. And the area categorization is also very helpful because user stories, once you have like hundreds, it gets so unwieldy, and so the categories totally make sense. Notes field, I noticed that you have that there. A lot of times what I'll have in notes fields is just like basic caveats or just very specific exceptions that I want to make sure get covered. Whether it's like a cardinality constraint, like, there can only be like 2 of these, or there must be only 1 or something like that. So that makes sense. Did you guys do the whole MVP? I'm just curious because I see the 2 workflows, but did you roll this up in the whole thing yet or no?
Just the 2 workflows. I mean, we have this landing page, but yeah. This just goes to Ryan's email, so if you want to spam him.
So you guys gonna quit your jobs and do this thing? Wrong answer.
You're fired.
I wholeheartedly hope that Sailor takes the plunge someday. That's good. All right, that's it. Good job, guys.
The rest of my team is not here. They're on a plane right now, Finland. Wow.
Yeah. I said, what? Take me with.
So I guess I'll bring up the supporting documentation first. Actually, yeah, okay. So I guess what I did was kind of similar to the last group, where I didn't do the whole. I didn't like all these separate things are user stories. Actually, for your sake, I should go to the synopsis of what the app is. So, SailPro is Anastasia's startup idea. Let me see, Command what? Plus? There you go. It's a website, sort of like an e-commerce website that will predict pricing going forward for some amount of time. It will show you, historically what the pricing has been for certain categories. In this case, we pick clothing and electronics. Electronics very popular on the web on the website. And then, how you gather the historical pricing and looking forward. Haven't figured any of that out yet, but so that's what the product is about. Now, going back to this. All right. So I put together just 10 examples of what the user might want to expect or might ask about on the website. 10 on the clothing side, 10 on the electronic side. Example, as a user, I'd like to hierarchically navigate the clothing simply by looking at icons or pictures. It's actually too small on this screen. So it's just, for example, those type of things. I picked 3 of them to break it down. One on the clothing side, which is blue. There's 2 on the electronic side. And then on the spreadsheet, I kind of just worked out, the different steps that might be involved. For instance, let me show you the first one. As a user, I'd like to pair my pants with a matching top or vice versa. I'd like to have a suggested pairing so when I'm currently shopping or buying. So if you have something on the screen, like a lot of sites you see, people who shop for this also shop for these things, right? But on this site, you're looking to buy something, not necessarily now, but you're trying to get a bargain on it, so you want to know what the projection is in the future. But also, as a user, I'm also shopping for pants or whatever. So I kind of broke down the steps. I tried to break down the steps into some of the things that might go on in the background. Determine what overall color the item is, match it with known compatible colors, determine what the style of clothing is, contemporary, business, edgy, whatever, long sleeves or short. I don't know how all that would be figured out. I mean, I probably through some sort of image, formula or something, some sort of image recognition. Mark which items are suggested favorites, suggest different items to go with it, record which suggestions the user visits to improve future predictions, things like that. So, and then I just I gave him a value, like, the 1, 2, 4, 8, whatever. They're probably wrong, but just to understand how the process worked. And then I came up with, 20, in this example, 22 engineering days, assuming one engineer. And then for this particular thing, $11,000 to implement, blended rate, whatever. Assuming work began on the first of the year, just using easy demarcation. It's coming up anyway. And then I counted for holidays and the weekends. It's personal day. I just figured somebody would need a person got sick or something. Awesome. No bank holidays because my company, we don't believe in bank holidays. We did working during President's Day, and projected finish, February 4th. And so here's I just mocked up a screen. I said, okay, somebody's looking for pants, and these tops came up. Somebody was looking for a top, and these skirts came up. Dresses, whatever, and then I did the next example, which was, as a user, I'd like to pair my pants with a matching top, or vice versa. Would like to wait. What's that? Oh no, that was part. Okay, I just put like the worksheet stuff underneath it. Next part was, as a user, I'd like to overlay different product pricing histories, predictions, so that I can determine how long I should wait to buy. And then I broke it down again in the spreadsheet, which would have been in this case, determine if the comparison makes sense. Comparing a laptop with a Bluetooth audio doesn't really make sense. You don't want to compare those two things. Determine if the user is registered for time span limitations. Registered user. Oh, in this case, if you're a registered user, you had the benefit of a longer time span, things like that. Convert hierarchical pricing to a graph, the pricing graph to an equivalent but measured in percentage, because you want to normalize things. So it's just different examples of things you had to do, and then I assigned a value to them, and came up with 12 engineering days. 12 engineering days. In this case, that feature would have cost $6,000. And then I continued from the last one ended at February 4th. This one began on February 5th, and then one personal day, no bank holidays, whatever. Finished on the 23rd, accounting for weekdays or weekends. And then here's an example. I just went to finance.yahoo.com and I overlaid the stock. So this would be an example of what you would see. Maybe this item depreciated more than that item, so you would see a difference in the pricing. And then you would make your decision on, do I want to save more by going with this item, which I kind of didn't, I want the other item more, but I save more on this one. So it just kind of gave the user some educational or knowledge to decide what he would like to do. And then there was
You're out of time.
Okay. The same thing on the third one. So.
Got it.
Third one was what? Splitting your credit card if you wanted to pay with multiple credit cards. So there was a whole workflow for that.
Got it.
So
what did you use for your mock-ups?
I just used, this was I couldn't get everybody together, so I just took it on myself, and I got this done in a day. Reading through all the material and all that. So I didn't use any of the programs like some of the ones that I saw here. I just did screenshots, pasted them together, things like that. Just the sections, like for instance, this credit card
But did you use like Mac Preview or did you use Photoshop?
I use the sniping tool and web pages.
Got it.
And then I just put them on the slides. So these are all each, this is a graphic, this is a graphic, I positioned them. So, that's what I did. And I only concentrated on the part that, so in this case, the splitting into multiple credit cards, I didn't do the basket, the cart basket or the couponing or whatever. I just did I just took screenshots of that stuff and just mocked up what you would see in that case.
Got it.
Yeah. So this graph here would be like, in a section here, you have your items over here. So that's all I was focusing on.
Got it. My sense, just in general, is that something like balsamic would probably have taken you even less time than the approach that you did.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
it didn't take much time. I mean,
it's fun. Okay. And just curious, so can you scroll up one slide, please?
This was for purposes of class. I mean, the balsamic thing, I guess if you were actually, you'd want some sort of interaction, right? So for the purposes of this class, that's what I did. Okay. What were you looking for?
So the one that has the user story. Just curious. So you basically took one user story and kind of mapped through all of the individual.
Right. So in the case of this here's the 20 of them. Obviously, there'd be more to this. Who knows? There'd be like 200 of them. And then I guess you add them all up to get the.
So a lot of times people will call that like an epic story. So an epic level story is basically something that's very high level that can be broken into smaller stories. So what I would recommend for what you had done, I think it's hard for some folks to see. I'm in the front, so I can see it. But I would still try to have your sub tasks essentially, or the decomposition of them still in the user story format as much as possible. And it's sometimes it can be hard to get it to that level of granularity. But I would bet you a lot of those smaller ones could actually be broken up into more of a clear user story format.
Yes.
Which is the reason why that's done, and I sometimes people will sort of fight me on it, but the reason why it's done is that the nice thing about a user story is that it's something that business people can talk about. It's something that a developer can implement. It's something that an engineer, a QA person can test, and ultimately something you can deliver and test in a scenario. So it really kind of gets through the whole development pipeline in a way that it's hard to do with sort of bigger categories. Anyway, so that's my one piece of feedback.
One more time, summarize that again, because I'm thinking about different things. But your one piece of feedback is
I would just break down. I would still keep strictly to the user story format, even for some of the sub items that you have there.
Right.
That's all. And through that exercise, you'll probably figure out even other kind of holes, because the goal of this is always to find just things that you're not thinking about. And then when you work through it in the story format, usually you'll just discover more things than you would otherwise.
Right.
I like your roll-ups. When you roll everything up and you've got, I think it's hilarious that you included, a personal day in there.
Well, the last guy doesn't get a person. He I just assumed he already took two. So.
So, I mean, the job of a manager is to, just try to always figure out, what you know, and then try to project what you don't know and try to quantify that.
Work some pushing there.
Sort of my job now as a manager's manager is to not believe any numbers I'm given and to add my own sort of buffer to things.
Intuition.
And that's what you have to do. If you go down to the next one, I saw something that I was curious about. So some of your things also have very high number of days. So just in general, I would try to reduce, another sort of notion
I
that
just
something isn't, because usually there's uncertainty in high numbers. So usually for my teams, I don't let anything get higher than an 8. If it's something that I'm focused on, 8 points meaning 4 days. So that one in particular actually is 4 days, which is fine.
This one right here. Okay, so we're talking about one of the other ones. So I had 2 to 4 in this one. And then I didn't have actually anything more than
my bad. I saw one of the 6s and thought it was over there.
Yeah.
So that's good.
I didn't want to have to figure out how to pull it or number anything. It was just part of the spreadsheet. So
overall, I think you did good. I think your plan there is probably less clear than a lot of the others that I've seen tonight, because I think like adherence to the story format, and then probably your groupings are good though. But other than that, that's probably the only thing I'd say critically.
Okay. Yeah, I was just picking, and I didn't realize it would need to be the whole thing all added together. The first few, you were talking about the total price to get it out the door, the MVP, which I have to ask, what did MVP, I get the concept of what the MVP is, but what did it stand for?
Minimum viable product.
Okay, minimum viable product. Right, the product out the door, to get it minimally out the door. That's what I figured. And so they had a price for the whole thing, and I kind of didn't realize. I thought it was
No, that wasn't part of the assignment actually. So they get bonus points for that. But that wasn't part of the assignment. But like if you're doing this for a real product, I mean, ideally you're going to map out all these workflows and roll them all up into a single summary where this is what you think the budget is, what you think the timeline is, and overall the description of the scope.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Good job.
Yep, so I'm Dalton.
I'm Nolan.
And we are Habilitech. And I think most of you are familiar with the main concept, but it's physical therapy using video games. So this is our epic story, which we call our Uber story. And this is the central challenge for us, is breaking this down in a way that's easy to use as a therapist. Because this meta story is extremely broad and kind of bold of these key concepts. I want to be able to take any input device, whether it's rehab or controller, any game console, and then customize those mappings in really any conceivable way, so that you can make therapy relevant motions map to effective game play. And some other key stories, and again, meta stories, the therapist can track progress over time, that the system can track progress in real time so that it can update the device parameters in therapy relevant ways, that therapists can run specific assessments outside of the game mode, which is one of the key limitations of using off-the-shelf games instead of custom therapy games. That you don't get the data about what they should be doing in the game. So you need a separate way to be able to see how well are they tracking. And then that patients can have a visualization mode where they can get used to new settings, so that they can say, okay, when I hold it here, then it presses the button, and when I hold it here, then it releases. So here's a few of our individual user stories for the key, just like mapping configuration screen. And it gets hairy pretty quickly when you start adding on all these configuration settings. And so kind of our core challenge is, how do we make it so that there's the default settings are as minimal and user friendly as possible, and therapists can just quickly pull up devices and map them to the console, but then be able to zoom in as much as possible, whether it's a therapist or an engineer, and be able to tweak all of these settings. And so we did not get into using, we played around with some of these user interface tools, and for the complex mapping thing, it just was too limiting, so we just used pen and paper.
That's a lot of custom GUI stuff that just is not quick in Balsamic or any of those.
Right. And so we actually explored a couple of workflows. One is just the basic admin settings where the therapist logs in and can select patients, add patient profiles, and then look at look at patient data, zoom into patient data, go into the therapy mode, and so forth. But the game configuration was the one that we spent a lot of time thinking about and still have a long way to go on. And so the kind of abstractions we came up with are, you just have whatever's plugged in, whatever you want to use as your input devices, it'll come up on one side with the devices available and then the individual functions. So if it's a rehab machine, it would be, at the simplest, it could just be one core function.
Channels or degrees of freedom.
Right. And and we call them internally at least channels, just like separate digital or analog inputs. We have the same abstraction for the output devices, so you plug in your game console, and then it'll come up with all these different target channels, so like the A button, the B button, joystick, and so forth. And then you can, in the simplest case, just take an analog input and map it to an analog output. So you just take your range of motion trainer and map it to the joystick. So the therapist should just be able to see these pop up, just like quickly either draw a line or select from a drop down, and now that's a map and they're ready to play. So the next level on top is to now be able to adjust kind of the dynamic range of these devices. So like say, change the range of motion necessary to map to the range of the joystick. So simple kind of like filtering operations like that where you're applying some transformation to the input. Or it could be something like thresholding where you're taking an analog input device, putting some thresholds to make it turn into a digital input. So now it presses the button when you pull all the way to the side and it releases when you pull all the way to the side. So then there's a whole other layer on top of that when you want to start combining inputs. And this is one of the really attractive features of the platform, which is so often patients will compensate using motions that are not desirable. So if you're trying to work specifically on their arm motion, they'll instead incorporate their trunk into it. And if they're successfully performing the operation but it's all trunk, then you're not effectively completing the rehab. So if you have some sort of sensor like EMG or something like that on the trunk or shoulder or whatever you don't want them to activate, then you can use that to kind of inhibit the output from whatever they're doing with their target motion, with their target muscles and so forth. So the ability to combine multiple inputs like that in a way that's effective and still intuitive. So where you're taking multiple input channels, combining them, and potentially thresholding after that. So you start getting these multiple levels, and it gets complicated pretty quickly.
For the reason we have, user stories, we don't have points, we don't have anything. We had some severe scoping issues, and we were wondering if anyone here, especially you, has any feedback on how we might simplify.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, no, that's fine. So, in general, and I should have mentioned this in my presentation if I didn't, Sketch is totally like reasonable, legit way. I mean, at the end of the day, you're just trying to communicate something, so there's no reason why sketching isn't reasonable. And we have design and discovery meetings where we do sketch-based approaches. So rather than like literally in a meeting working with a customer, we have a designer sketching things out in real time while they're having a conversation, rather than like waiting a day and sending it over email. So Sketch totally makes sense. From scope assassination perspective of what you're referring to, you mentioned 3 levels, right? So 1 is just like ordinary like switch, 2nd was thresholding, 3 is combining, right? And then there's also permutations of those, right? Did I get all that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like 1 is just like straight up mapping, the 2nd one is applying transforms, like range or
single
switching
channels
to individual channels, and the other one is being able to take multiple channels, combine them in arbitrary ways, and then apply filters at any level.
So I think it obviously limits the number of games that you can use as part of your platform, but I would take 2 of those 3 and just say, phase 2, and just focus on 1. So there's going to be games that won't, that won't work for it. Maybe, is it possible does that actually screw up, now you can't use the motion pad or the buttons? Because obviously the first case is covered by the buttons, but for the actual motion pad, do you actually need the thresholding in order to do the motion pads?
Well, it's more about the therapy movement. So by being able to kind of take arbitrary inputs you can, which means you can support multiple input devices at the same time. That alone makes it so that you can deal with most issues within games. So you could take like a normal game controller and map it to most of the functions and just map the rehab device to like one of the functions. And that way that either the patient with their other arm or another person can do that. So it's more about how do we make this gameplay rehab specific or therapy relevant. And so that's where, so for instance, there might be settings where the game, like the core mechanic of the game that makes it playable is a digital thing rather than analog, but they're really working on an analog range of motion thing. And that's a nice flexibility thing where you can take, okay, they're still working using the same analog input, but using that just to trigger one direction or the other with thresholds. So the thresholding is pretty important.
Got it.
And then the combining inputs is, I think, a key differentiating selling point versus other things that are out there.
Okay.
What's the simplest thing that can be done with what you're talking about here? I mean, I'm just kind of, I have a stupid story I never forgot. We spent, what was it, $1 million to make a pen that would write in space for the astronauts. The Russians used a pencil. I never forgot this. I think it's a great story. So what's the simplest thing that you can do, that's what I would work on, and I would do that. And then once you do that, I think as you go through the process of doing that, again, I've found in life that, like, if I can keep it stupid simple, then maybe I can get it done. I think you're talking about 3 levels of things there, man, that you can spend your life trying to do, right?
Yeah, I mean we have, so an example of something we have currently implemented in the clinic is a rehab device that just works on rotational motion, and they're using that to play driving games. So.
And how many rotational motion rehab patients are there? What, millions?
Yeah, I mean it's like it works on one kind of set of motions for like we're working with certain patients now. So I mean that.
I think that's your answer. Yeah. Like you're already doing that, so. I think from like a user story perspective, this is actually, Uber story you described it as an epic story. I think I would trim every one of those annies. Any input device, any game console, any input device functions, any game controller function, and try to figure out what's gonna capture, essentially the most bang for the buck, and limiting that as much as possible, and still have something that's marketable. So you say the combination against other competing functions. I can't really address that because I don't understand, exactly the market or the competing functions. But that's something that can totally be tested in like sort of lean startup way. Your assumption, your hypothesis is that you actually need that. Your customer might not care at all, especially if you're able to kind of limit things. And you just mentioned like one example, it's totally working. That might be the only example that you need, right, to build a marketable product in a business. Like that could be it. That's the bigger market. So I would try to map, basically how do you limit scope to capture the widest net that ultimately has the best like opportunity. It's not always all about making money per se, but for a business perspective, you need to build a profitable business, otherwise you can't sustain yourself. So in that sense, you do need to figure out what the biggest opportunity is. So I think there's a way to do it.
Would the thresholds vary per person using?
Yes. Yeah.
So every time the machine recalibrates.
Yeah, so the therapist would, or automatically it would progress.
Right, part of the other flow is having like patient-specific profiles, so they could just load up mappings.
That was the first. Right. This, you select a patient and you have a profile. It keeps the state from the previous time, and you can update it as they progress.
But a nice function, for instance, is if you have the thresholds, you're working on range of motion, then gradually the thresholds can increase as the patient improves. So.
And then you're keeping that. That's actually good because you're keeping records of data over a period of time, and many people can use that data.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're totally out of time, by the way.
But think of all the places. I mean, I'm just thinking about. I was just reading this article about Africa and how big it really is, because they shrink it on maps and everything to make it all sort of fit. So I was just thinking about it. They do, really. You should see.
The Mercator projection.
Really, but I'm just thinking, like, there's so many parts of the world where they really need things like rehab. And so if you got this one thing where, like, I treat this better than anything else, then you're literally able to ship it to people to use and everything. And to your point, you're able to remotely track it. I mean, that would be amazing. And like, if you help rehab broken legs better than anybody else on earth, right? You know, it's all you do that one thing, improve your concept. And I'm sorry, I know so little about like rehab and all this, but
you're on a good track. We should talk offline. Yeah, I'd be glad to help you guys, work through some of this.
That's good.
But
Thanks.
good job.
Thanks.
Good start.